Hey guys, my name is Rye. Today I wanted to walk through how I did my plus 16 Cinderbrew on my Brewmaster Monk. I've had a ton of fun playing the spec the past couple weeks and learning it again as I haven't really played it much in Dragonflights, but this was my last key that I had to do to get my 16 resilient, and I wanted to walk through some of the pain points, how I did some of the gathers, and how I made up time for not being able to do the double hop goblin skip. I am dwarf on this character and not night elf, and our demon hunter was not comfortable with nether walking the skip, so I'm going to show you guys the perspective that I took in being able to handle this key. In the first pull, threat can be an issue, and I chose not to run Black Ox statue in this dungeon specifically because I think it's clunky. I am going to go in here, keg smash the first muscle, keg smash the right pack, and then immediately go into that weapons of order reset for another keg smash. I'm going to be exploding kegging very early here once everything's gathered just for threats, and I'm going to be making sure that I press a chi burst too after I kind of get everything grouped. One little mistake I probably should have done there is swept before my chi burst, as it would have, prevented the knockback and given me an extra global. But throughout this pull, I'm basically just keeping my Black Oak Kick Breath of Fire for the damage reduction and then feeding Tiger's Palms into my brow target. On this pull, you should be opening with Fort Brew, using a non-use trinket if you have it, and then rotating in a Dampen Harm with all that falls. You can definitely use Ring of Peace here as well if you want to get a little bit of space between these mobs, as the attendants and the patrons are what's going to hurt a ton. The muscle is going to be beating up your team, and the attendants and the patrons are going to be giving you a ton of white hits. I think this is a pretty hard and challenging pull on Brew to kind of get down, but once you get it, it's not going to be too bad. I think you should have a pretty easy time surviving. When I am fighting Chewy, I am going to be chaining a ton of these Pyromaniacs into the mini boss here. The specific reason why is because you can kind of take your time with this room in fighting Pyros, as you can fight a ton of them on boss or on Chewy as needed. You can completely slow down the first pull and even pull triple muscle if you wanted to, if you want to elect to reduce a pull in the dungeon, which I didn't want to do as we're not all in communication here. But if you do want to, you can just choose to chain a Pyro in one at a time into Chewy. I'd recommend maybe doing 2 if you're in communication with your healer and they say that's okay, but probably not doing more than 1 at a time just because of the dispellable debuff. The Pyromaniacs put a living bomb in your team, and if it can't be dispelled, there's a good chance somebody's going to die and just get globaled from Chewy's knockback plus the Pyro debuff. As soon as Tenderize comes out here, I am going to be chaining and going and getting another Pyro, which I can finish off into the next pack. Remember, there's absolutely no time pressure here, as I have the same amount of pulls regardless, as I'm choosing to fight this area in 3 pulls as opposed to 2. If you have practiced this dungeon a little bit or have watched my stream, you'll see that on my Presovoker I do this whole area in 2 pulls with a couple Pyros on boss. That includes healing 3 muscles in first pull and fighting a bunch of Pyros on boss just to make up a little bit of time. It is time efficient, but again, if your team doesn't practice it, I would probably recommend not doing it. On this gather here, and I'm fighting a muscle again, you'll see that I use my trinket early, and I go into Fort Brew on this gather. Anytime I'm fighting a muscle, patrons, and, those pyros, I want to make sure that I respect the fact that I'm going to be taking a ton of damage from white hits, and as well, I'm going to be taking damage from the muscle itself. When his keg comes out, remember that you can use diffuse magic to reduce the magic damage taken from the muscle, and as well, you're going to want to be able to use things like Ring of Peace and Leg Sweep to buy yourself some room if you need to reset your bleeds. This is a great time to use your Dwarf Racial if you are playing Dwarf, and as you can see here, I'm watching and waiting carefully on my Brews and my Black Ox Brew to get that reset. I'm still a massive fan of playing Black Ox Brew as opposed to playing, Bob and Weave, as it gives you a ton of agency and autonomy over your brews. Remember, it does scale with CDR as well, so having the ability to kind of snap back your brews, get a free CB, or as well if you need a double purify for some healing into Black Ox Brew, you're going to get your Black Ox Brew back really fast. You'll notice on these packs, I sometimes kind of alternate between spending my Black Oak combos on Tiger's Palm or spending them on Kegsmash. If you need a little bit of extra CDR, or you're just kind of caught in the global or need to for threat, going Black Oak combo in a Keg Smash is more than acceptable. However, remember the Tiger's Palm 2 is great for reducing your brew CDR as well as great priority damage. I still think the interaction of having to spend Black Oak Kick in a Tiger's Palm on AoE trash is awful, and I really miss the Dragonflight approach of being able to spam Spinning Crane Kick. Albeit costly, I really don't like the situation that Brew's in right now for not having a good opportunity cost between the two. I find it a little bit frustrating. I really want to play thematically around, spinning in big packs, as it was good threat, good damage, and a ton of fun. On this boss, there's really not too much to talk about. I'm pretty much just following my single target rotation, picking up brews where I can, and if I really need to, sending out a Vivify on my team to help out with a little bit of the debuff. I am playing with a Disc Priest, so right now Disc and specifically Oracle is really strong, and as you've probably seen, I play with Clemens quite a bit. For those who tuned in my stream, Clemens is a good friend of mine and is an exceptional healer, and he does have a YouTube channel I want to link as well so you guys can check him out if you are curious about Oracle Disc Priest. I've been playing with him for 2 seasons now, and he's a great healer, and even though there's like this weird misconception still, like I said, about Brew and Disc Priest, I felt really strong with Clemens, and I think like Brew's in a strong enough position right now where you don't really have to care too much about your healer. I do really like playing with Resto Druid, I love playing with Preservoker, I love playing with Disc. Not a crazy fan about playing with Arsham, as you know, unless they're like a one trick, and they're really good at their spec. I really don't like not having an external for your team, and I find that Resto Shamans, every time I've kind of played with them, have struggled. I think the melee comp kind of going around, I've seen a lot of Brews play it, is that Brewmaster Resto Shaman, and I think it has merit just because the raid buffs and running melee comp, but I have loved playing with the Nance Shaman too, so I think if I do, you know, make a team or make some more videos, you're going to see probably a bunch of different comps. I think the nice thing is, throughout all my 16 keys so far, I've played with a different comp in like almost every dungeon. I think the exception may be 1 or 2, and I played with Clemens a bit. I played with Resto Druids, I played with Disc Priests and Preservokers, but particularly I have played with a ton of different DPS in all my keys, including, you know, range comps, melee comps, etc. I think the one thing about this dungeon that you need to consider is coming up with a route that works best for your team and your composition. I do opt to go to the B boss next, as I do think it gives us a better lust timing, but I do have to be cognizant of the fact that our team cannot skip those double those double hobgoblins. Like I said, our demon hunter is not very familiar with doing the nether skip, and I'm still a dwarf on Brewmaster. There is a way you can execute a death skip, but I said, you know, screw it, we're just going to play it and we'll make up time elsewhere. I kind of wanted to figure it out just for time and see if it was really that bad. Turns out it is. But as you can see, when I go into the B pole, this is probably one of the scariest parts of the dungeon from a tank perspective. I've had a ton of tanks flop here, and you know, I haven't spent too many tries doing Cinderbrew. I think we one-shot 15 the first time we were in here, and then we spent attempt or 2 in 16. But going into this pole, you really want to make sure you have an on-use trinket and fort brew. The reason why is these little beelets are really deadly on gather and can pose you a little bit of a problem if you aren't careful. I go into this pack, I keg smash, I rising sun kick, I set up my weapons to order, and I exploding keg. When these worker bees are going to die, they are going to do their final sting on you. As a brewmaster, the final sting isn't that deadly, but if you are in communication with your team, you should be calling for stops here, or you should be saving a large cooldown like dampen harm, or doing something to desync them if you can. As you can see, I cast Paralysis on one of the final stings just to desync them a bit, as it does help me kind of live some of the heavier hits. As compared to on BDH, Brew is a pretty easy time with these stings, as you can stagger them, and you know, you can just purify them off right away. You do want to avoid a scenario where you have all 5 of them sync on you at once, as you know, you can just still get global. As I'm going to this next pull, again, I keg smash, I breath of fire, and I want to get my chi burst out here early for threats. I really just don't like using Black Ox statue, as I've tried to mess around with it a little bit, but I don't find threats to actually be that big of an issue unless, you know, I'm sloppy. For the most part, having a good opener with, you know, keg smash, Black Oak kick, breath of fire, a crane kick or 2, and then spamming your weapons of order is going to get you a ton of threat and you're going to be doing a ton of damage. Again, on these pulls, you just want to be very careful and give enough respect to the little beelets. These are things that are really going to do a ton of damage to you. Unfortunately, our shaman does go down there to a pretty bad overlap, but he does onk, and we are moving on with the key just fine. I do chain in the beelets here, get some thread on them, spinning crane kick a little bit, and make sure that I'm popping enough brews to kind of stay alive. One thing to note is you can diffuse magic these debuffs onto the beelets, and it will reduce the damage you take from the application of the dot. So using diffuse here is like be potent and being able to help survive the grouping. On this next pull, I am pulling this out here and I exploding keg early for threat. A really good trick is that when you are hitting exploding keg, you are going to reduce the melee damage you receive for the next 3 seconds from those mobs by 99%. meaning that for these little beelets, Exploding Keg is amazing at making sure that your gather goes smooth, you get threats, and you don't die just in the gather. I think the beelets might actually unironically be one of the harder parts of the entire key, as they just queue up a ton of melees, and that debuff can be pretty nasty. On these pulls though, once you're through most of the beelets, all the trash in this side of the room should be pretty easy to handle from a tank perspective. As you can see here, I don't even mind that the final sting's going on me. It's gonna hit me in the back here, I think, but I just don't really care. It doesn't really do much to me. One final sting isn't the end of the world, and like I said, even if you need to handle a couple, it's more than okay. As you can see, I am running the Swamp-based trinket from Floodgate in the Skeet. I think this trinket is amazing for any dungeon that has damage over time effects. I'm dealing with bleeds in here, I'm dealing with these bead debuffs, and I am constantly taking those debuffs that are both magic and bleed, which is going to reduce the cooldown of the Swamp-based mud trinket. I do think that this trinket is probably better than Bomb Suit in a lot of cases, but I don't really think I want to run 2 on use yet this season until I feel like I'm dying. I feel like I've been pretty immortal on Brew, and I've really enjoyed playing the Pacemaker. I think it's really good. But with that in mind, I think like there are a lot of really good trinket options for Brewmaster, and you can play a lot of different things to be okay. My preference around the mud trinket might not be somebody else's, and I think if you choose to play something else, or run Bomb Suit and mud, or run no on use at all, that might be okay as well. I think playing Absorb on use on Brew, especially for gathers, is insane. And going back to Season 2, I think I was one of the only Brewmasters that ran double on use as opposed to running cheat. I think giving double on use gives you a ton of agency as well, just like Black Ox Brew, to be able to cover your gaps and not have to worry about a healer healing you. I think Cheat Death was great, but back in the time, and even in Season 4, if you watch any of my videos, you'll see that I ran double on use trinket as opposed to cheat. Like I said, I like control, I like having a choice, and you know, I'm just not gonna die, right? Like, if I die, I die, I fucked up. Otherwise, you know, it kind of sometimes you could argue makes you a better player, but the nice thing about Brew as opposed to BDH is that you can't really get RNG'd out in this class. Usually your deaths are just you messing up. If you do die to RNG on this class, it's probably due to magic damage, but because of the way how our mastery works, one of the things that you do is you can force dodge every, third attack, which means that you can't just die to white hits on Brew like in one global. It means you're going to slow right out to them. With that in mind, you know, I still do think Brew's in a pretty good place right now, and if you are careful with some of your decision making, you shouldn't fall over very easily. Clem seems to think that he has a pretty easy time and doesn't really have to worry about me too much, and just a power word shield here and there is all that I really need. On the B-Boss, I feel like one of the things that I've gotten and seen feedback on is that there is a tough problem with aggro on this boss. If you are a Black Ox statue enjoyer, this is actually a really good boss where it would work, but otherwise, if you just want to run over to the bees, hit a keg smash, hit an exploding keg, or a chi burst, you're going to have a fine time being able to pick up these ads as well. So you can probably see I'm leaving all of the puddles on one side of the room, and I'm going to transit out now and again to drop these puddles. The particular reason why is I just don't want my melee to have to deal with puddles all over the room, and I don't want our healer to be able to have to, worry about puddles being in 8 different directions when he's trying to clear bees. As you can see, I drop a transcend here, I roll back, and I'm back to the middle of the boss. I would say as a tank, this boss isn't particularly challenging, especially as Brew. I think you have a lot of tools to be able to live just fine. And you can see here, I'm going to do a pretty big transcend out just to drop my puddles in a familiar spot, and I go back to the boss. I don't think you really need to do this. I was more doing this for style points because I thought it looked kind of cool, but I would say keeping the puddles out of the middle of the room and either on one side or against a wall is probably best practice. When the boss is about to die, I kind of just do whatever with them, but you do want to be in a position where you can pick up bees as much as possible, and I think fighting in the middle of the room is probably your best bet. So like I said, pick a side, drop some puddles, and make sure that you have a keg smash or something to be able to pick up bees here. I do kind of mess up that puddle as I was talking in Discord, I think, to Clem at that point, but that's okay. As the boss is almost dead, I'm going to be in touch of death range, and we're going to be able to go on to the next part of the dungeon. One thing you'll see here that in my route, I did forget to pick up these bees. I meant to pull them in the boss, but I think I kind of got carried away on the gather, and I do decide that I'm going to just kind of pull these with us, as our timer's looking pretty okay. But remember, we still do have to fight 2 hobgoblins in this dungeon and we can't do the skip. With that in mind, I do have to pick up the pace a little bit here, as I know this key timer, if I'm not careful, might be a little bit tight. I can play safe, but at the same time, I want to make sure I'm giving my team enough space for errors and making sure that I don't overcommit to any pulls and fall over. The IPA trash can be very deadly on tank, and you do have to be kind of careful. I do elect to pull this first 3 pull and skip the next 4 pack, as I am going to be skipping that 4 pack and then playing the 2 hobgoblins. Again, on gather, you see that I hit my tank trinket, I go on my weapons of order after kegsmash, hit my rising sun kick, and I'm starting to build my stacks. One thing to note, as a tank, one of the best things that you could do is save your CC and your leg sweep to when you're dealing with the charge. Anytime hobgoblin charge comes out, that's when your team's going to be the most susceptible to taking a ton of damage. So stopping and kicking those free samples when the hobgoblin charge is coming out is kind of going to be your imperative. Kick where you can, assign a marker if you're in communication, and make sure that you're giving respect to these mobs as well. Brew droplets, taste testers, and the hobgoblin are going to hit you a ton, so making sure you alternate things like dampen harm, fort brew, and as well your black ox brew for snap resetting those kegs, or if you need to, or those brews, is going to be your best chance at survival. Remember, when you have a free global, don't freak out, just hit Tiger's Bomb and go back to your regular scheduled programming. I do try to save cheebers towards the end of these packs just to be able to pick up the brews, as I find I kind of have a tough time dealing with them, but like I said, could also be a Black Ox statue angle. I just hate that ability. As you can see, so far in this run, we've had no deaths from aggro, we've had, a swirly and a bad overlap, but if you are struggling with threats without playing with a rogue or a hunter, I definitely recommend taking a Black Ox statue and just macroing taunt into it. We are going to play this 3-pack solo, which is the slowest part of the entire dungeon, and I was a little bit worried about it, but I just said, what, we don't have people in communication. I've obviously played with Learnsy before in past seasons. I know Clem, I played with Fort a ton, Galax, good DK, we can figure this out. So we do elect to play these double hobgoblins, kill off the flavor scientist, and then we'll go on and do some pretty big pulls in the next room. I would say that one thing I could recommend here, if you are struggling to tank this place on Brew, is taking your time. This is a 16, and you notice we play pretty conservatively and still time the key. So if you are struggling with routing, I think a pull that a lot of people do is do this pack plus the pack in the corner. The problem with that is if you're fighting double hobgoblins and you're fighting 2 testers and 2 pyros, is you're going to have a ton of casts go off and a ton of debuffs kind of going off at the same time. One thing I could recommend is if you do want to play this double hobgoblin pack with the pack in the corner to my right on the screen right now, to hit paralysis, demon cage, hex, or sheep on one of the casters. That way too, you guys can focus one down and pull in another one, and you should be more than okay. As you can see, the brews kind of come out here. I do hit a leg sweep, and I am trying to make sure that I'm feeding some threat into the little brews and as well killing the hobgoblin. These brews hurt a ton, so make sure that, if you need to, with this overlap, if one hobgoblin dies, you're rotating things like dampen harm, or even fort brew if you really need to. In my route, I do elect to want to kill these before I go through the next door, because we are going to be mind soothing the pack on the corner. This is going to be buying us a little bit of space and a little bit of time in the next room, as I can do a pretty nice pull next. We do have DKCDs, we do have Metamorphosis, and we do have Shaman 2s. We're going to walk by this pack, and I'm going to do a pretty big pull here with a hobgoblin. This pull is very scary to live, and you're going to see here that I do drop a little bit low. I do get my kind of ramp started, but I do make a mistake and hit my rising sun kick after my weapons, which isn't the end of the world, but it does kind of suck off the go as I got a little bit panicked. I am playing Chi Surge for threat as opposed to running more defensive talents, so a little bit of threat and damage. And on this pack, we need to make sure that we're doing enough to kind of stop. This is a great time to use Ring of Peace if you have to get it kind of out of the puddles on the ground, setting a kick where you can, and then ramping up all of your damage. I do roll dampen harm once my fort brews ended. As you can see now, I'm a little bit scared. I have no Black Ox brew, I have no fort brew, and Clem just used his last charge of pain suppression on me. This is the end of the pull, and our shaman does go down, but we're more than okay as the hobgoblin's almost dead and I'm gonna have touch of death. As soon as this hobgoblin dies, we are in an okay spot to kind of keep playing, and I live perfectly fine. I would say this is probably the second hardest pull in the dungeon, maybe next to some of the B pulls, but as soon as these these brew droplets are out and I have a little bit of threats, now I'm off to the next pull. I am very light on defensives right now, but I do have that nice Swamp Face trinket coming up, which is a great healing absorb for me. So I do use that on gather here as I kind of pull everything, as I want to make sure that I'm not just dying in the gather. Once I'm in together, I hit that leg sweep and I hit that exploding keg to kind of give myself a little bit of leeway as they come at a sweep. One combo that I always loved in Dragonflight is using that leg sweep exploding keg combo, as it does buy you a ton of time to kind of like after the stun falls to not get a bunch of melees all at once. They will desync a little bit. But as you can see, this pack dies very, very fast, and I'm just kind of feeding Tiger's Bombs, getting those brew resets, and if I need to, buying space with ROP. I did get a little scared there at one point, but not scared enough that, you know, I was going to die, just enough to give myself a little bit of space with ROP. I only have 2 pulls left in the dungeon, and one of them is the last Hobgoblin, and the last one is going to be a 4-pack into Boss with Lust. Our timer's pretty okay, as I know we're probably going to get 2 more lusts, so I do elect to pull this Hobgoblin into the Flavor Scientist pack in the corner. I do my regular pull, I throw a keg at him, you know, I start ramping up my Blackout combo, I get my big Breath of Fire out, and now I'm just doing regular damage. One thing to note is whenever you're fighting these tester packs, you want to be very careful of the brews. If you feel like you need to hard swap to them because your composition can't kill them, you can definitely use, Exploding Keg just to kill them. You can swap Tiger's Palm, or you can even use Touch of Death, and you should be more than okay. I don't really need to save any defensives for this next boss here, so I do end up committing Dampen Harm, just to kind of stabilize myself a little bit at the end of this pull. I don't really want to use a Bane Sup, and you know, at this point as well, I don't have Black Ox Brew, so rotating anything you kind of need to stay alive is more than fine. I think that one of the foresights you need to have playing Brew is when and when you don't actually need something. There are tons of packs you can get away with actually just not using defensive at all once you're gathered, and kind of the scariest part is gathering the mobs. Once you're in a big pull, you should be more than okay. I do elect to pull this next pack, go into Boss and Lust, so we get 1 more Lust in the last 20 seconds of the key. I immediately pull the Boss, we hit Bloodlust, and I am ramping up my Weapons of Order. With 3 melee, this fight is going to be a little bit more difficult than I'm probably used to. I haven't done this fight with all melee before, so I am making sure that I give my melee a little bit of space. We're moving the same direction, and we're controlling the adds where we can. The one amazing thing about Monk on this boss is you have Speed Taunt. When playing with your Speed Provoke, you can make this boss move very fast and give your team a ton of space from the adds. I do have a problem in this fight sometimes where your Ring of Peace can actually go on the ceiling if you're not careful, so you have to be very careful about, you know, where you place it. As you can see there, I spent a little bit of time adjusting my camera to make sure the ring didn't go on the ceiling and just away from my team. We still do have those testers and those pyros alive, and we are making sure that now we're finishing them off before the next set of adds. If we did have maybe a ranged DPS, they probably could have died sooner, but you know, it's a little bit hard of a pull to ask all melee to do, but we did make it through okay. I'd recommend only doing that pull if you've kind of practiced it, especially just because of CC and, you know, distance and making sure that you get the appropriate amount of kicks out. When these mobs are all grouped together, I am going to get a ROP in just to get them all gathered. You can use ROP one of 2 ways in this fight. You can use it to gather, or you can use it to push. On this specific time, I'm using it to gather so that they're all stacked up so that our melee can all get them down evenly. Our melee do have to swap off from IPA to these brews quite a bit in this boss because we have no ranged DPS or no class that can easily handle them, so making sure that they have it in a place where they can all hit them is kind of my imperative. As you can see, I roll away and I use that Speed Taunt to get as much room as I can away from these blobs. This starts to end up being a little bit of a scary set because one ad is very desynced, meaning he died really late. Whenever an ad dies really late, he's going to be desynced from the rest of the ads and spawn at the very end of the cycle, meaning that we won't be able to easily AoE him down, and our team's basically going to be on the boss. As you can see here, I'm doing a pretty good job at keeping the boss pretty close to the ads and keeping them well grouped in a way in which is able to enable my Havoc Demon Hunter, my Unholy DK, and my Enhanced Shaman to hit them appropriately. There's that last brew I was a little bit worried about, and he's coming in right now, and I have to get my team to hard swap to him. Once that blob dies, we should be caught up and we should be back in a better spot now. I think your job as a tank on this fight is figuring out what you have in your comp to be able to handle these blobs and doing the best you can to kite around the room whilst also enabling your melee. I see a lot of tanks really struggle with this because they have no idea how to enable their DPS, but as you can see how close I keep the boss to these brew blobs and making sure that we can get cleave on them and other abilities is going to be the best case scenario that I have to being able to make sure my team succeeds. Remember, as a tank, your number one job is to enable your DPS players. Well, I guess it's your second job. First you have to live. Then once you can live, you enable your DPS, but nobody's going to want to play with a tank that, is running around all the time, out of D&D, out of totems, can't cleave, nothing stacked. So finding out little methods in which you can do to enable your DPS is going to be a good learning lesson for you long term. As we're at the 3:30 mark, I'm starting to get a little bit nervous about the timer now. We played really safe in this key, but however, we want to make sure that we still have enough time to do the upstairs and the last boss. I do call to commit to IPA here, and we do get that ping out to make sure that the boss dies. I do roll back into the boss and get ready to commit Todd, but as you can see, I'm running the boss to the door to give our team as much space as we can. I do blender here, and it looks like I click on a B, and I start zoning out for a second because I'm talking, and it turns out I actually don't get on the B at all, so I'm sitting here waiting, thinking I'm on the B, and I actually waste 15 seconds in the key here to air. If I was the first one up, I could have engaged this pack, 8 to 15 seconds earlier than my team, and they wouldn't have to be waiting up here, which could have saved us a couple seconds. But we are at about 6 minutes left in the key. This last boss is going to be about 4 minutes, and we still have to do these Yesmen. I do set up a skull, and what we're going to be doing on this is even killing the first two, and then as well MCing the skull marker. If you have played with a priest in here and have seen this technology before, basically you can MC one of these yes men on the first set when all 4 of them are alive, and what that's going to do is it's going to prevent them from healing. So you're going to see that one skull is really low, we're going to get Clemens to mind control the ad, and as well we're going to release them after the next one dies. If you're really smart about this, you can also actually multi-kill them at the same time. If you get them really low and then execute one and then even touch death one, you can actually kill 2 at once, and that can save you upwards of 40 seconds. It's a very big time save here, and as you can see, my touch of death was 9 seconds off from being able to do this, but unfortunately I kind of mess up. As you can see, we released that MC and we used the touch of death there to kind of execute that last mob. What I probably should have done here, and it was a mistake on my end, is saving that Todd and trying to even kill here. If we were able to even kill, like I said, it would have been an immense time save in this key and would give us more of a buffer in case we had deaths on this boss. On this last boss, there are a bunch of different strategies you can employ as a tank to be able to make sure that your team gets a bunch of uptime and you're clearing appropriately. I've messed around with a couple different ones, but I've liked the 2-1-1 approach, kind of similar to Edna in the Stone Vaults. What I like to do is clear 2 on the right hand side of the room, as the side you're looking at right now, clear 1 behind the table and 1 on the left hand side. If I'm playing with all range DPS, you can kind of do it however you like, but with melee you have to be a little bit more cognizant of their uptime and what you can do again to enable them. Remember, on this fight specifically, you're going to have to be moving around a ton, you're going to be dealing with debuffs, you're going to be getting knocked back, and I'm going to show you a couple tricks of how to get through this most efficiently. As we engage the boss, I'm tanking him towards the table, and I'm making sure that I clear the first 2 behind me. I'm setting my weapons of order just for damage, and if I need to, I'm popping to defensive, and as soon as I'm in the air, I'm rolling back in. The reason why you want to roll mid-air afterwards is you want that boss not to move so your melee can hit it. Remember, consistency is very, very important, and you want your melee to have as much uptime as possible in some of these encounters. So making sure that you're dragging the boss as little as possible and giving them the ability to always be able to be melee and hit their buttons is going to be the highest DPS uptime you can do for your team. Make sure here that you're not running around too much and that you're giving your team enough space as well for the barrels. You want to tank the boss away from the barrel explosions after to make sure nobody gets globaled, and then reset on the table when he does his intermission. Again, I'm just doing my basic combos here, Black Oak Kick, Tiger's Palm, and then if I need to, Rising Sun Kick off CD, and then Keg Smash. I'm trying to set up here to get another double, and it's a little bit finicky, but I do manage to pull it off. And again, watch the barrels exploding. I'm trying to pull the boss away as fast as I can to make sure that my DPS know where the boss is so that they can consistently hit it. I am here clearing behind the table, and I'm doing the same thing as I'm moving back away from those barrels and giving my DPS as much uptime as possible. Again, just like IPA, this boss is all about consistency. Make sure that you have a pattern and a plan, and you do the same thing over and over again, and you should be more than okay. I do queue my weapons order, as if I queue it now, I'm going to get one more use in the fight. I love playing Chi Surge, as it does give me that little bit of a shorter weapons of order. But basically, you should probably just be using it off CD for single target boss dam. I don't think I did the most boss dam I could have here. I think I definitely missed some globals as I was trying to like orchestrate and like finesse the barrels a couple times, but on some fights, you know, I can do a lot more. Some fights do a little bit less. This explosion was pretty big. I did 2 here, and now I'm looking at the timer and thinking like, oh shoot, we only have 2 minutes left. We gotta parse. But luckily, as if you do remember on IPA, we did lust early enough that we do get that extra lust in the last 35 seconds of the key, pending there are no deaths. At this point, I do know though that if we do have another death, this could be the end of the key, so I'm very careful about where I spin, what I'm doing, and making sure that as soon as I'm fixated, I'm standing still. I think that's another big thing too, which is more obvious than it probably should be, but as soon as you pick a direction, don't be swinging around. Make sure that you're facing the same way, and you should be more than okay. At this point, the key's almost done. I'm watching the timer tick down, and I'm kind of reflecting on the fact that, you know, what I could have done differently. I think as I start to prog 17, I'm gonna have to figure out a way to skip the hobgoblins, whether that's, you know, using a death skip, using a nether skip or something. But I do think fighting those 2 hobgoblins is way too slow to apply to high keys, and even though I've timed this on 16 on my Press Evoker, this is way too tight of a key for my comfort on 16 for my Brewmaster. But given that it was my resilient key and I was pretty proud of this one, I am still pretty happy with the outcome, and showing that you can W key this key, you know, not with an ideal comp, not with an ideal tank, and just kind of using the resources you have available to you. Hopefully this key was informational to you to be able to tank this key on a 12 or higher on Brewmaster. I've had a ton of fun playing the spec. If you have any questions, comments, interested in the routes, my talents, or anything else, I'm going to drop a link to my Discord in the comments below. In there, you should be able to find everything that I have on all of my classes and my specs, as well as the routes and some of the decision making I make in some of my keys. Thanks again for all the support, thanks again for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.